In the heart of the American Midwest, where the landscape stretches endlessly under a wide-open sky, there are stories that crawl into the darkness of night and whisper to the most adventurous souls. One such story, a chilling urban myth that has traveled through trucker circles and back roads for decades, revolves around a lone truck driver and an eerie encounter on an isolated stretch of highway. It was the summer of 1998 when Jack Thompson, a seasoned truck driver known for his calm demeanor and steely nerves, embarked on a late-night haul across the desolate highways of Nebraska. Jack had driven through all kinds of weather and endured countless lonely nights on the road, but nothing could prepare him for the terror that awaited him on that fateful evening. The job was straightforward: deliver a load of equipment from Omaha to Denver, a route Jack had driven numerous times. But on this particular night, as the clock ticked past midnight and the moon cast long shadows over the asphalt, Jack found himself on a stretch of highway he wasn't familiar with. It was a detour caused by unexpected roadwork, sending him through a part of the state he had rarely seen. As he drove deeper into the night, the world outside seemed to fall away. The only sounds were the steady hum of the engine and the rhythmic thump of the tires against the road. The radio was off, the silence almost oppressive. Jack had grown used to these solitary moments, but tonight, an unsettling feeling gnawed at him, a sense that he was not alone on this desolate road. At first, it was just an odd flicker in the rearview mirror, something Jack dismissed as a trick of the light or his tired eyes playing games. But then, the faintest sound of a vehicle came from behind, an old truck with dim, erratic headlights that seemed to be shadowing him. Jack, a man of patience, tried to shake off the unease. After all, he was on a highway, and trucks did tend to travel these routes at odd hours. Yet, something about the way the truck followed him, keeping a consistent distance but never getting too close, felt wrong. As the miles ticked by, the truck's presence grew more unnerving. It was as if the driver was deliberately keeping pace, making sure Jack knew they were there. Every now and then, Jack would glance in the mirror, and though the truck's lights were always there, they were never quite close enough to see clearly. The air in the cab grew colder, and Jack's usual calm demeanor started to fray. Just when he thought things couldn't get any stranger, the truck suddenly vanished. One moment, the eerie headlights were trailing him, and the next, they were gone. Jack's relief was short-lived. He soon encountered something even more unsettling: a series of eerie, cryptic messages scratched into the asphalt, as though someone had been warning him about something. Each message seemed to be more foreboding than the last. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to make sense of what he had seen. He pushed forward, desperate to reach his destination and escape the unsettling experience. But as dawn broke and the sun began to light up the sky, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for him somewhere along that lonely stretch of highway, a dark presence tied to the mystery of the truck that had followed him. And so begins the legend of Jack Thompson's terrifying night on the road, a story whispered among truck drivers, a chilling reminder of the things that go bump in the night and the dangers that lurk in the shadows of America's highways. Jack Thompson's grip tightened on the steering wheel as he sped through the winding stretch of highway, trying to push the unsettling experience behind him. The morning light seemed to do little to dispel the dread that had settled over him. As the hours ticked by and the sun climbed higher in the sky, Jack's thoughts kept drifting back to those cryptic messages on the road. What could they possibly mean? Who had left them there? As he neared the outskirts of a small town, he decided to pull over at a diner for a quick break. The place was an old, rundown establishment with a flickering neon sign that read, "Open 24 hours," which seemed oddly fitting given the night he'd just had. Jack ordered a strong coffee and took a seat at the counter, hoping that a hot drink and a few minutes of normalcy might help him clear his head. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a worn apron, noticed the unease in Jack's demeanor. "Long night?" she asked as she poured his coffee. "You could say that," Jack replied, his voice gravelly from exhaustion. "I had a strange experience on the road last night. Saw some weird messages scratched into the pavement." The waitress raised an eyebrow, a look of recognition crossing her face. "Messages on the road, you say? You're not the first to mention that. We get stories like that around here every so often." Jack's curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" "Well," she began, leaning in slightly, "there's been talk of strange occurrences and ghostly sightings along that highway for years. Some folks say it's the work of a restless spirit or maybe something even darker. There's a local legend about a truck driver who went missing out there. They say he was last seen on that very stretch of road." Jack's eyes widened. "What happened to him?" The waitress shrugged, a look of concern crossing her face. "No one really knows. He just vanished one night. Some say he got lost or broke down. Others think he might have been taken by something supernatural. There's been a lot of speculation, but nothing concrete." Jack couldn't shake the eerie coincidence. The truck that had followed him, the strange messages. Could there be a connection? He finished his coffee, paid the bill, and got back on the road, more determined than ever to reach Denver and put the whole experience behind him. However, the sense of unease persisted. As he drove further, Jack couldn't help but notice that the landscape had changed. The once familiar stretch of highway now seemed more foreboding. The trees along the roadside grew denser, their branches twisting like gnarled fingers reaching out toward the road. The sun, which had been shining brightly earlier, now seemed to be obscured by a dense layer of clouds, casting a gray pall over everything. Every now and then, Jack would catch sight of something out of the corner of his eye, a shadowy figure darting between the trees or a flicker of movement just beyond the reach of his headlights. He tried to convince himself it was just his imagination running wild, but the chill that ran down his spine was all too real. As nightfall approached, Jack's anxiety mounted. He knew he was nearing the area where he had encountered the mysterious truck, and he dreaded the thought of having to pass through it again. With every mile, his anticipation grew, and the road seemed to stretch endlessly before him. Just as he was beginning to think he might make it through without incident, he noticed something in the distance, two sets of headlights approaching from behind. They were far too close together to be two separate vehicles. Jack's heart skipped a beat. The pattern of the headlights, the eerie sensation of being followed. This was all too familiar. The truck, the same one that had shadowed him the night before, was back. Its lights glowed ominously in the darkness, reflecting off the wet asphalt. Jack's pulse quickened as he tried to shake the truck off, changing lanes and accelerating. But no matter how fast he drove, the truck remained in pursuit, its headlights never faltering. In a desperate bid to escape, Jack took an exit off the highway, hoping to lose the truck in the maze of smaller roads. The route twisted and turned, leading him deeper into an area he didn't recognize. The truck followed relentlessly, its presence like a dark cloud hanging over him. Just when Jack thought he might finally outrun the truck, he found himself on a deserted, gravel-covered road. He pulled over, his hands trembling as he glanced in the rearview mirror. The truck's headlights were gone, but the sense of dread remained. Jack took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. Whatever was happening, it wasn't going to be easy to explain or understand. With the sun beginning to rise on the horizon, Jack decided to continue his journey. He could no longer see the truck, but the memory of those eerie headlights and the unsettling feeling of being followed haunted him as he drove on. The experience left him questioning everything he thought he knew about the road and the forces that might lurk in the shadows, waiting for the next unsuspecting traveler to cross their path. The sun had fully risen by the time Jack Thompson reached Denver. Exhausted and unnerved, he pulled into a truck stop, desperate for a moment of normalcy and a hot meal. The shadow of the mysterious truck still loomed large in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply amiss. As Jack stepped out of his rig, he noticed a small group of truckers gathered around, chatting animatedly. Curiosity piqued. He joined them and shared his harrowing experience. The truckers listened intently, their expressions a mix of skepticism and intrigue. "That's wild, man," said one of the older truckers, scratching his beard. "I've heard stories about trucks following drivers, but nothing like this. You might have encountered the same thing I did a few years back." Jack's ears perked up. "What happened to you?" The trucker leaned in, lowering his voice. "I was driving a similar route, and I had this truck following me for miles. Just like you, I tried to shake it, but it stayed right on my tail. It wasn't until I hit an old, abandoned stretch of road that it finally disappeared. Later, I learned that road's been closed off for years. No way a truck should have been there. Some folks say it's a ghost truck, driven by someone who got lost or worse, and they say it's looking for someone to join them." Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. The road he had taken was indeed abandoned, part of the detour, now sealed off and forgotten. That night, Jack tried to put the ordeal behind him. He went to bed in his hotel room trying to block out the haunting memories, but sleep eluded him. At around 3 a.m., he was jolted awake by a strange noise, a deep rumbling that seemed to come from beneath the hotel itself. He went to the window, peering out into the dark parking lot. To his shock, the parking lot was empty except for one solitary truck, an old, beat-up rig that looked strikingly similar to the one that had followed him. Jack's heart raced as he grabbed his flashlight and cautiously made his way outside. As he approached the truck, he noticed something odd. The driver's side door was slightly ajar, and the interior was eerily empty, despite the truck's lights being on. Jack hesitated, the fear gripping him tightly. He took a step closer and peered inside. The truck's cabin was immaculate, neatly arranged and untouched. But on the dashboard, a small, folded piece of paper caught his eye. With trembling hands, Jack unfolded it. The message read, "You've seen too much. The road we travel is not ours to control. Beware what follows you in the darkness." Jack's breath caught in his throat. He quickly stepped back, heart pounding, and watched as the truck's engine roared to life. The rig's headlights flared on, casting an eerie glow across the parking lot. But before Jack could react, the truck began to move, slowly, deliberately, before vanishing into the night, leaving nothing but a swirling cloud of dust in its wake. Shaken, Jack returned to his hotel room, but sleep was impossible. The words on the paper echoed in his mind. What did it mean, and who or what was behind that truck? As Jack continued his journey, he couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was watching him. Stories about ghost trucks and eerie encounters persisted, but Jack's experience had left him with a new, unsettling awareness. The road he traveled might hold secrets far darker than he had ever imagined. In the end, the mystery of the truck followed him beyond that night, a chilling reminder of the unknown forces that lurk just beyond the edge of the headlights, waiting to turn an ordinary drive into a haunting adventure. And so, the legend of Jack Thompson and the ghostly truck continued to whisper through the trucker community, a spine-tingling tale of a road where reality and the supernatural intersect, leaving those who traverse it forever changed.